Welcome back to another reading and correcting. With me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I, as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And if you're looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 4 of Breaking Step. Tibs looked at the names on his list, 2 and 3 of them, all runners. The runners laughed who'd protected Merchant Row, and half of them were still injured, because the guild wouldn't let the clerics heal them until they reached Stowe's door. Only a little more than twice that had survived Sebastian's raid. The guild had yet to announce when the runs were starting again, and Tibbs wondered if those could happen with so few runners. Was it best to let Stowe rest, instead of getting him to use up resources with little in return? After surviving the raids, the first 2 floors wouldn't be much of a challenge for the runners, left doing them. He only had 8 fighters left and 2 archers. The others were all rogues. He didn't know the distribution of those not working for him, but more fighters than the others had survived among them too. What was there even more than was there even more than 4 sorcerers left? Unless the guild allowed the team to double up on a class of runners again, there was no way everyone could have a team to do their runs. And then that would mean at most 10 teams plus the nobles. Each teams would go in twice each 9 days. That would make Jackal happy, at least. What do you think, Tibbs? Jackal asked from the other side of the table. It's going to be tough keeping all the businesses safe if thieves come in drove. It's a good thing Harry's guards are stopping most of them as they arrive. Those aren't thieves, the warrior pointed out. Those who manage to make it past the guards and that we've caught are intent on destruction, not robbery, and they don't care what they destroy. Tibbs hadn't expected Sebastian's revenge from beyond death to start this quickly. He'd hoped for weeks to rebuild his forces and the town. If not for the guards, Tibbs would be overwhelmed trying to stop them. I'll speak with the other runners. After the raid, they have to understand how important it is we keep the town safe. Or they aren't going to want to have anything to do with fighting anymore, Quigley replied. Not all survivors become hardened soldiers. They're runners. But Tibbs knew that didn't make them people who wanted to fight. The dungeon didn't give them a choice, and neither had Sebastian. But how many only did the bare minimum to survive their runs, went to the appointed training, then spent their time enjoying themselves, acted like their next run would be the last instead of making sure they survived it? It surprised him how many survived with that attitude. A handful of them were runners who'd paid to be here, stuck fighting Sebastian's people when the attendants vanished. Only the serious runners had stayed once they returned, but Tibbs wasn't sure how. I wasn't sure he could trust them to being wasn't sure he could trust them to want to keep the row safe. They were here willingly, so they didn't suffer at the hand of the guild as harshly, so weren't as attached to Cragglerock as the others. In their favor was the fact they weren't nobles, so they weren't but they also weren't street or criminals for whom being a runner had been a reprieve of a more direct punishment. He'd had few interactions with them outside of offering help with how to deal with the runs. We need everyone who can be convinced to help, Tibbs finally said, especially if outright destruction is the goal. When the guild brings in the new convict, those will be easier to talk into working with us. We'll just have to manage until then. Quigley watched him, and Tibbs ignored the look. The warrior was the one who'd wanted Tibbs to get back to running things, so he could accept this was how things would go. All right, how do you want to divide the patrol? Quigley asked. Tibbs watched the workers laying down the paving stone along the end of Dungeon Way. which cut most of Craggle Rock in half on this side of the transportation platform, and over the dirt patch, continuing to the step leading up to Stowe's door. The townsfolk were crowded in. The townsfolk were crowding into the few surviving buildings, and this was what the guild spent resources on? Turning a dirt path into a paved one? They should be building housing, restoring shops, seeing to the people who kept the town going instead of, well, this. Why would the runners care if they walked on dirt or stone when going to do their runs? Amelia, Mrs. Noble Friend, was doing the work of the guild, bringing in workers to rebuild the town, while the rest of the nobles were taking advantage of the destruction to separate themselves from the rest. Mere days after Sebastian dies, rubble around the nobles' quarter had been cleared, including houses that had been untouched by the destruction. They planned to erect a wall to protect them from the rest of the rabble. Tibs didn't know who had owned those houses, or if they'd survived the raid and used the coin the nobles paid for the houses to survive the raid and use the coins and had left using the coins the noble had paid for the houses. And he didn't care. They weren't town folks anymore. This was simply more of what nobles did, which was whatever they wanted. More workers leveled the ground by the bottom of the steps. Not where the path would be, but on the side. These were dressed in aprons and leather chaps to protect them from the sharp tools they used. They were townsfolk, working with whatever they could find. He noticed Cross among them and headed there. The people cheered on seeing him, slapped his shoulders when he was in reach, thanked him for saving them. Hero of the town, they called him. Killer of raiders, and other names he didn't care for. He wished Dawn had played his usual game and claimed all the fame, but the sorcerer was nowhere to be found. He was still in the town. He had to be, since he, like everyone brought here from a cell, wasn't allowed to leave. Tibs, Cross called, pausing in pulling a larger stone out of the ground with a few other workers and wiping sweat from her brow. Lowering yourself to our level and offering to help? Don't make me larger than I am, he replied flatly. He didn't care that she was making a joke. He didn't like being made into something he wasn't. She looked at him with an odd expression. Are you okay? I'm fine. He motioned to her leather armor with the metal weights attached to it. Wouldn't it be easier to work without all that? That's the point, she replied. He kept watching. She kept watching him for a few seconds, then went back to the stone. Around them, the others leveled an area large enough for a house. None of the area facing the dungeon was flat, even if this wasn't as bad as where it turned into the hill going up to the town. Have you asked runners to help? Tibs asked. This would be easier with earth essence. They've done enough making sure we lived, a woman said, her accent thick, smiling at him. They deserve the rest for getting back before getting back to this. She motioned to the door with the old shovel in her hand. We aren't asking heroes to work like this, a man said, using a spear to stab around the stone. We aren't heroes, Tibs said, and got an amused look in return. You did as much as us, he told Cross, so why are you letting the guild force you to work here? The guild's not making us do this, an overweight man said, his clothing sticking to him from the sweat. This is where my new shop will be. Mine's going to be next to it, a woman said, covered in dirt. She pointed to the other half of the area being cleared. We're helping, another said, because what's going to happen if all we do is rely on the guild? Nothing, a handful of the workers replied. Then more reason runners should help you, Tip said. Your shop helps us as much as anyone else in the town. The overweight man grinned. The coin you'll spend at our shop will be help enough. Tibs nodded. He'd offered and they'd refused. What else could he do? Why are you doing work then, Cross? You aren't going to benefit from the shop the way the merchants will. She motioned to them. They're paying me to stand guard. What you're doing doesn't look like standing guard to me. She rolled her eyes. Look around. What's going to tempt a thief? It's boring just standing and watching. And what I did during the attack is nothing like what you runners did. I didn't take on dozens of thugs like a certain fighter we both know, or if the stories are to be believed, how you did. That the group you took down were smaller doesn't diminish the help you gave, Tibs countered. And without an element, what you did is even more impressive than anything one of us did. She shrugged. And what's bringing you to this part of the land? If you're hoping to convince them to let you in, you're not going to have much luck. She nodded to the guards on each side of the open door at the top of the steps. I think they're overcompensating for standing around not doing anything while you went and saved everyone. That's not what I did, Tibbs stated, to which she smirked. I'm walking around seeing the state of everything after spending the morning going over the state of our people with Quigley. He motioned to the workers at the top of the hill. I noticed them and went to see what they were doing, then noticed you down here. What is the state of the runners? Cross asked, and a few of the workers paused to listen. There's barely 5 and 0 of us left. Half of that I need to convince to help protect Merchant Row if I don't want to exhaust the runners doing the patrol there. We'll help, a young woman offered. She was muscular and had been swinging a pick at a large boulder. She'd be at it for some time. The rock extended deep under the ground. It's okay. You've been through enough. We'll handle it. Are you okay? Cross asked him, that odd look back. I'm fine. Tibs? Stowe said, while Cross looked like she was debating something. Can we talk? She shrugged. I'd better get back to work. I can't just stand around and set a bad example. Tibs nodded and walked away from them and to the cliffside. What's going on? Stowe asked. My door's open, but no one's coming in. Tibs waited until he reached the stone wall. The guild's not letting us do runs yet. Until when? It was fun listening to the people who I protected, but that was a while ago. Tibs sat and watched the workers. It was only a few days ago. Still too long, Stowe said dismissively. Tibs, are you okay? You seem, I don't know, different? Karina died. He tightened his hold on the ice to prevent it from cracking. Sebastian killed her before me. Oh, Tibs. I'm so sorry. I know how close you and her were, and it's okay, he said, fighting the straining ice. I'm fine. Oh, all right then. Do you know when you'll be doing a run again? Or anyone else? I'm bored and... Wait, no. You don't just sit there being fine when someone dies. You hurt and you miss them. What's going on, Tibs? Nothing. The ice cracked and he pushed against the reminder of the pain harder. Ganny, something's wrong with Tibs. Tibs? She said. What's wrong? Nothing. I'm fine. Karina died, Stowe said, and Tibs closed his eyes to focus on the ice and the heat building under it. Oh, Tibs, I am so sorry to hear that. It's okay. I'm fine. Okay, there's something wrong with him. Oh, good, Stowe said with relief. I was worried I'd been wrong. You called me over, Stowe. Yeah, but how often do I get stuff wrong about them? You're the one who gets them. It's why I called you. I was pretty sure there was something wrong with him, but now I know, so we can fix it. Silence. How do we fix this? What's wrong, Tibs? Again he asked, her tone soft and sounding closer. Was the ground under them riddled with tunnels they could move through, now that Stowe's influence extended past the mountain? She died, he said, not intending to, and cracks appeared in the ice. Did you make Sebastian pay? Stowe asked. What? Don't look at me like that. You heard the things said when he didn't know I could hear him. Tibs doesn't just sit down and miss someone who dies. I did. His smile cracked the ice more than the pain, and for if not for how quickly one could switch to the other, he'd let some of the control go. He wanted to enjoy how he felt, shattering that man piece by piece. I broke him until there was nothing left of him. Why aren't you angry, Tibs? Kenny asked. He swallowed. He swallowed, and heat slipped through the cracks. It hurts too much. Tried to push it down, fill it with water. If I get angry, I'll want to burn everything down. When I get angry, I hate everyone for letting Karina die, even those who had nothing to do with it. And if you did that, she said, the guild would know you have more than one element. He frowned, and working out what was wrong with her statement tempered the heat slightly. Yes, but I'd have hurt people who don't deserve it. Still said she understood people more than he did, but this showed she didn't understand them completely. There was only so much either could learn from listening in on runners. Of course, I'm sorry, she was quiet. Isn't there a place you can be angry and not hurt anyone? If I get angry, I'm going to channel fire and I'm going to let it eat everything. Ice is safer for everyone. It's easier to deal with everything then. But is it safe for you? She asked. The look Khrushchev gave him when Tibs told him he was fine. How Quigley had looked at him this morning whenever they weren't addressing the schedule directly, or how Cross had only minutes ago. Even those who didn't understand how he was doing it didn't like what he was doing. It doesn't matter. The heat was buried under ice again, and he no longer cared about the consequences. Not that neither Genny nor Stowe could do anything to. Would it help if you could be angry somewhere no one could get hurt? She asked. What are you doing, Genny? Stowe asked. Tibbs chuckled at the idea anything could be safe while he channeled fire, then clamped down as cracks spread through the ice. Well, remember what Robert said when he was talking about his father? All that anger he kept bottled up? That was a while back, Genny. He is the one who was eaten by the rats when I added them to the second floor boss room, right? Yeah, that's him. Yeah, he was talking about how that about that with the rogue. He said it killed his father. He had so much of it that it was like thorn growing in its chest until he died. But that wasn't real, was it? Stowe asked. It's that thing you told me about, a figure of speech. Yes, but his father still died from being so angry all the time. Do you want that to happen to Tibbs? Of course not, but when you say somewhere no one will get hurt, I know you mean me, and that does hurt. I'm not saying I won't do it, he said in a tone that made Tibbs think that if Stu had eyes, they'd be rolling, just reminding you that it's my body you're offering for him to burn. Just part of it, she replied. No, I'm not going to hurt you. I can deal with it, Tibbs still said, and if it's going to help. I said no. Tibbs stood. I'm not hurting anyone. It'll pass. I got used to Mama not being there anymore. I'll get used to Karina's absence too. Who's Mama? Stowe asked. Tibbs, Jenny said gently. If doing this can kill you, aren't you hurting yourself? He shrugged. If he was, at least he was hurting someone who deserved it. And this concludes chapter 4 of Breaking Step. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the story, it is available for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead and support me at the same time, that is on my Patreon, where you can get about 20 chapters ahead of Royal Road. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. Links are in the note. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.